serbisyo na kasama sa puhunan ang sipag at tiyaga. Ang mga OFW, maraming sakripisyo, ninanais maging kapaki-pakinabang maging sa kanilang pagbabalik bansa. Sapagkat ang ating mga bagong bayani, Pilipino pa rin sa puso at damdamin.
We're working to connect a region of over 600 bridges between our lands.
Hello, I'm Alma Angeles and you're watching Asean in Focus. We're coming to you live from Manila and Thailand. Hello, Esther.
Hi, Alma, and to all our viewers, I'm Esther Odanga from EBC Thailand Bureau, bringing you the news in the dynamic ASEAN region.
On today's headlines.
Obviously,
Australia, Malaysia, New Zealand, Singapore, and the UK celebrate the 50th anniversary of the Five Power Defense Arrangements, or FBDA, with a flight past and naval display in Singapore.
The Department of Labor and Employment, or DOLE, on Monday reiterated that companies cannot withhold their employees' salary for the reason of non-vaccination against the COVID-19.
The chair of House Ways and Means Committee said the country's economic manager should prepare a contingency plan to insulate the Philippines from spillover effects as China's economic growth slowed to 4.9% in the third quarter amid the debt crisis surrounding property giant Evergrande's debt crisis.
And Vietnam is looking to begin the 31st Southeast Asian or SEA Games by the middle of May next year.
First in our news, Australia, Malaysia, New Zealand, and Singapore. And the United Kingdom celebrate the 50th anniversary of the Five Power Defense Arrangements, or FPDA, with a flight past and naval display in Singapore. The event also marks the end of a 2-week exercise conducted by the five nations across Singapore, Malaysia, and parts of the South China Sea this month. Let's take a look.
obviously 50 years on, the security challenges in the region and indeed the world has changed. But the FPDA remains relevant. I think it reflects the strong commitment that the five partner nations continue to give. It also reiterates our posture being non-threatening, not directed at any one country, but as a regional grouping that promotes inclusiveness and cooperation among the militaries. And I think those are very relevant messages in our time. So I think the biggest threat is not any one single country. The biggest threat is misunderstanding and miscalculation. And the FPDA acts as a stabilizer, very much for the region. It acts as a paradigm of an inclusive military grouping that works together for the peace, regional stability of the region.
Now, Dr. Ning was speaking at the Marina Barrage, the flight past and naval display. The flight past comprised 3 segments, with the middle portion involving 10 air assets from Singapore, Malaysia, Australia, and New Zealand flying in formation. According to a Channel News Asia report, this included an F-16 and F-15SG fighter jet from Singapore, 2 Su-30 MKM fighters from Malaysia, and 2 F-A-18F fighters from Australia. The fighters were also trailed by New Zealand's larger P-3K2 airborne surveillance aircraft, as 3 helicopters from Singapore and New Zealand flew just below. Now, this was sandwiched between 2 displays from RSAF fighter jets, which performed a Delta flight past and aerial salute. The FPDA was founded in 1971 to help protect Singapore and Malaysia, but has since evolved into a military cooperation group. Under the pact, member states must consult each other in case of an armed attack on Malaysia or Singapore.
Fully vaccinated travelers from 8 countries will be able to enter Singapore without quarantine from Tuesday as the business hub eases restrictions and gears up to live with the coronavirus. Singapore cannot stay locked down and closed off indefinitely. This is according to Prime Minister Lee Hsien Loong on October 9, when he announced a raft of measures under a living with COVID-19 strategy. Lee pointed to the Delta coronavirus variant as a factor. Take a look.
The Delta variant is highly infectious and has spread all over the world. Even with our whole population vaccinated, we still will not be able to stamp it out through lockdowns and SMMs. We need to update our mindsets. We should respect COVID-19, but we must not be paralyzed by fear. Let us go about our daily activities as normally as possible, taking necessary precautions and complying with SMMs. The threat of COVID is now mainly to seniors, 60 and above if you are not vaccinated, or 80 and above even if you are vaccinated. So for 98% of us, if we catch COVID-19, we can recover by ourselves at home, just as we would if we had the flu. That's why we are shifting to relying heavily on home recovery. It will be the norm for COVID cases. You can get well in a familiar home setting without the stress and bother of admitting yourself into a care facility. At the same time, as part of living with COVID, we must also connect ourselves back to the world. In particular, we must continue to reopen our borders safely. Companies and investors need to carry out regional and global business from Singapore. People working for them need to travel to earn a living. We have started vaccinated travel lanes with Germany and Brunei, and just announced another with South Korea. These pilot projects have shown it is possible for vaccinated persons to travel safely while letting in very few COVID-19 positive cases.
The city-state initially fought the pandemic by shutting borders, lockdowns of varying intensity, and aggressive contact tracing. But with more than 80% of the population fully vaccinated, authorities in the global aviation hub are keen to revive the economy. They opened travel lanes for vaccinated passengers from Brunei and Germany in September and will expand the scheme from Tuesday to another 8 countries: Britain, Canada, Denmark, France, Italy, and Netherlands, Spain, and the United States. The lane with South Korea will start on November 15. Under the policy, passengers will not have to quarantine if they have fully vaccinated and tested negative for the coronavirus before they depart and on arrival. The city-state is home to regional offices of thousands of multinational corporations which rely on Singapore's status as a business and aviation hub for their operations.
Back here in the country, a total of 1,509 children aged 12 to 17 years old have been vaccinated against COVID-19, according to a health official this Monday. During an online media forum, Health Undersecretary Maria Rosario Berjere said there were 4 adverse effects following immunization recorded from those who were given the jabs. Let's listen in.
Yes, total vaccinated as of October 16, it was already at 1,509. As of October 16 at 8 p.m. As to the adverse reactions, meron kaming mga na-receive na report. Though I would just like to caution all of you, I'm going to give you the overview or the brief details. No, ito po yung nakuha natin report kasi hindi pa siya officially reported dun sa VG flow natin sa Food and Drug Administration. So ito po ay pinag-aaralan pa rin ng ating mga vaccination sites at vaccine cluster tapos magsusumite sa FDA. Pero ang nakuha nating report meron po tayong 4, no? Isa po ang nangyari ay isang bata na nagkaroon ng pagtaas ng presyon, but after 2 hours, they were able to manage it. Naging normal na yung blood pressure ng bata. Pangalawa, merong ding isa nagkaroon ng allergic reaction, but it was managed at nag-resolve din yung allergies. Tapos may dalawang stress-related, no? Dun sa immunization, no? May mga anxiety tayo sa pagbabakuna. So yung dalawang reaction na nakita nila was determined to be stress-related because of the vaccination. So ito po yung nakuha natin, but again, let me caution all of you, it's not official yet. We still need to input that into the VG flow of the Food and Drug Administration.
A health official on Monday reminded of the need to proactively promote minimum public health standards despite the lowering of the alert level status in the National Capital Region and community quarantine classification in other areas. Dr. Edsel Salvana, a member of the Department of Health or DOH Technical Advisory Group, warned about complacency to prevent potential super spreader events. Watch this.
Important talaga that we stick to our health protocols. Ang understanding naman natin dito is magbababa tayo ng alert level dahil medyo nakakahinga na ng konti. Ngunit madaling bumalik yan kung hindi po tayo mag-iingat. Yung pinakamalaking insurance talaga natin dito is yung mataas na rate ng pagbabakuna dito sa NCR. Ngunit alam naman natin ang nag-circulate na strain talaga dito sa ating bansa ay Delta na. So, kailangan po talaga ibalanse natin habang nagbubukas tayo, kinakailangan tuloy-tuloy pa rin yung ating minimum public health standards at kung hindi pa po kayo nababakunahan, magpabakuna na po kayo. Kung maiiwasan natin yung mga potential super spreader events, lalo na kung maramihan talaga yung mga tao, iwasan muna natin. Kasi bagamat binaba natin from alert level 4, nasa alert level 3 pa rin tayo. Ibig sabihin, wala pa tayo dun sa level na pwede po talaga nating sabihin na hindi natataas yan or hindi pa madaling biglang umakyat yan dahil na magkaroon po tayo ng super spreader events. Hindi pa po dapat masyado tayong relax at this time and iwasan po natin yung mga activities that can potential into super spreader events. We require na lahat ng manunood ng sine ay dapat bakunado po talaga. Hindi po pwedeng manood ng sine ang taong hindi pa nabakunahan. Pangalawa, kailangan minimum public health standards at hindi pa po papayagan kumain ng popcorn or uminom ng mga soft drinks sa ating theaters po. So, we're trying to balance po itong ating mga activities while seeing if it remains safe. Pero ang pinaka-importante po talaga dapat bakunado lahat ng nasa tinatawag na 3Cs na indoor activities kasama dyan yung restaurants. Ito na nga, yung ating theaters, kinakailangan po talaga we have to stick to the minimum public health standards. Every time naman natin ini-ease itong ating mga restrictions, tumataas po ang mobility and there really is a higher chance for the virus na makapag-spread. Pero pwede po natin itong mapigilan sa pamamagitan ng adhering to our minimum public health standards at dahil mataas na rin yung antas ng pagbabakuna, mas mababa ang tsansa na magkaroon ng severe disease kung mahawa man ng isang tao at kinakailangan po talaga nating dahan-dahan. We have to live with this virus. Hindi na lang po talaga pwedeng lockdown tayo ng lockdown dahil magugutom po yung ating mga kababayan.
Salvana said people should learn how to live with the virus.
And staying in the country, the Department of Labor and Employment, or DOLE, reiterated that companies cannot withhold their employees' salary for the reason of non-vaccination against COVID-19. In a virtual forum, Labor Secretary Silvestro Bello III said this policy is a violation of the labor code. Let's listen in.
Kasi alam naman natin na yung policy na yan ay labag sa batas. Under the law, hindi mo pwedeng i-hold ang sweldo ng employee mo unless there is a legal basis or legal cause. Yung hindi mo pagbabaksin o pagbabakuna, hindi yan legal basis to withhold the salary of the employee. So, hindi pwede yung policy na yan, yung no vaccine, no pay, yung no vaccine, no entry. Wala yan, hindi pwede yan. If totoo na meron ng ganong employer na hindi niya sinasahuran yung kanyang employee dahil hindi nagpabakuna, agad-agad we will issue a compliance order, and that is to pay the salary of the employee because there is no basis to withhold the salary of the employee.
Let me just reiterate to the public, hindi dapat maging basis ang pagbabakuna para mabigyan ng sweldo yung mga nagbigay na ng trabaho para po dito sa kanilang mga work, no? Unang-una, wala po tayong batas pa na nagsasaad na kailangan mandatory ang pagbabakuna. And that was verbalized by the Department of Justice. Ang meron lang tayo, binibigyan natin ng incentives and encouragement ang ating mga kababayan para sila ay magpabakuna na. So hopefully hindi po ito maging basihan para magkaroon tayo ng mga issues na ganyan. So,
in Malaysia, the federal civil servants who fail to complete the COVID-19 immunization will be subject to disciplinary action or termination of service when the new policy on immunization involving civil servants is implemented from November 1. According to a Bernama report, the policy was signed by PSC Director General Tan Sirimod Khairun Adib Abraman, where it said that officers could be instructed to complete their vaccination from that date. Meanwhile, officers who could not complete the COVID-19 vaccine doses due to health factors could be instructed to undergo a medical checkup with a registered medical practitioner. They may also be instructed by the head of department to undergo a COVID-19 test if they have been confirmed unfit to receive the vaccination for health reasons. The PSD, in a statement on September 30, announced that all federal civil servants were required to be fully vaccinated against the COVID-19 virus before November 1.
Meanwhile, the Department of Transportation, or DOTR, is set to recommend the Interagency Task Force for Management of Emerging Infectious Diseases an increase in passenger capacity in public utility vehicles, or PUVs, in the National Capital Region following the downgrade of the alert level status. In a press briefing last Monday, DOTR Assistant Secretary Steve Pastor said they would recommend increasing the capacity to cope up with the increased number of individuals using public transport. The current maximum passenger capacity is 50% from alert level 4. The quarantine status in the NCR was downgraded to the more relaxed alert level 3 starting October 16 until the 31st or end of the month. Now, Pastor said the increase in passenger capacity will be significant and assured that the proposal to be submitted to the Interagency Task Force would be based on both technical and medical studies. He also said the department would soon consider the safety protocols existing in the affected local government units, or LGUs. Pastor said that in the meantime, the DOTR would continue monitoring the passenger capacity in PUVs amid the pandemic. And the news continues here on Asean in Focus. Esther and I will be back right after this.
Araw-araw sa panahon ngayon, may daming tanong kailangan ng tugon. Nandito si Ali at si Papi na rin, ang smart at pretty nanay, ang sigla pag nagkwentuhan. Ang sigaw ng Pinoy Nation, information, education. Ating salaopin, ipakita natin ang nagsagot sa problema natin. Ano sa palagay nyo? Ano sa palagay nyo? Ano sa palagay nyo?
Welcome back. The chair of House Ways and Means Committee on Monday said the country's economic managers should prepare a contingency plan to insulate the Philippines from spillover effects as China's economic growth slowed to 4.9% in the third quarter amidst the debt crisis surrounding property giant Evergrande's debt crisis. Albay Representative Joey Salceda said it is best to prepare a low-hanging package that includes fast-tracking infrastructure next year, increasing food production, a proactive rollback of policy rate reductions early next year, and continued spending on the Emergency Employment Fund to assist displaced workers amid the pandemic. Salceda said the country's experience with global systemic risk is that the earlier it prepares, the better it performs. Salceda was referring to a liquidity crisis that China's Evergrande Group, which has more than $300 billion in liabilities. The development has rocked global markets. He said South China-based luxury real estate developer Fantasia Holdings also said it failed to make $206 million bond payment 2 weeks ago. He said China's economic condition could also be an opportunity in disguise for the Philippines to open up its economy and welcome more investments from companies seeking to diversify supply chains. He added that while corporate recovery and tax incentives for enterprises or CREATE Act is the greatest tool in this regard, the enactment of amendments to Retail Trade and Liberalization Act, the Public Service Act, and the Foreign Investments Act could also be beneficial.
In Vietnam, the government issued resolution number 131/NQ-CP dated October 18, ratifying the Asean Trade and Services Agreement, or ATISA. The government tasked the Ministry of Planning and Investment to take prime responsibility and coordinate with relevant ministries and agencies in organizing the implementation of the agreement. ASEAN has pursued services liberalization since 1995 by expanding the scope and coverage of its commitments in the ASEAN Framework Agreement on Services, or AFAs, that was used to guide services liberalization. The shift from AFAs to ATISA in 2019 is envisaged to advance services liberalization and ultimately closer regional economic integration because of the adoption of the negative listing approach, which assumes that all sectors are liberalized unless otherwise specified. The agreement affirms ASEAN's commitment to free and open trade and regional economic integration against the present multifaceted challenges of trade tensions, global pandemic, and economic uncertainties.
And here's a video from ASEAN Secretariat explaining how the ASEAN Bloc is banded together to respond to the challenges brought about by the pandemic. Watch this.
Year 2020 was a difficult year for ASEAN. COVID-19 put us through the ringer. Thousands are dead, millions are infected, and countless more are without jobs or an education. In 2020, the ASEAN economy shrunk by around 3.8%, the region's first economic contraction in 22 years. In this episode, I will talk about how ASEAN states banded together to respond to the COVID-19 crisis. I will also discuss what we are doing to help countries build back better. The importance of planning and preparation for any crisis cannot be overstated. Even before the pandemic hit, ASEAN had mechanisms that could be mobilized for information sharing and collaboration. When the coronavirus began spreading in January 2020, we acted fast. We quickly activated our existing regional mechanisms. The ASEAN Biodiaspora Virtual Center is one such mechanism. The center collects and analyzes big data and produces risk assessment and surveillance reports on COVID-19. The ASEAN Emergency Operations Center Network for Public Health Emergencies is another mechanism. The network facilitates real-time technical information on the coronavirus and generates daily situation reports on countries' COVID-19 interventions. ASEAN also tapped its health sector cooperation platforms to share good practices, learn about new developments such as the latest diagnostic tools and therapeutic approaches, and discuss ongoing challenges and gaps. The data and information gathered from these mechanisms allow countries to make informed decisions about the pandemic. In addition to activating regional mechanisms, ASEAN launched new initiatives to improve our pandemic response, hasten recovery, and build resilience against future health emergencies. Many of these were developed with or supported by its dialogue, development, and external partners. Let me mention some of these. First is the COVID-19 ASEAN Response Fund. Countries can access the fund to secure much-needed medical supplies and equipment, such as masks and test kits, and procure available vaccines. It can also be used for research and development on COVID-19 prevention, diagnosis, and treatment. Second is the ASEAN Regional Reserve of Medical Supplies for Public Health Emergencies. Many of our countries suffered from a shortage of personal protective equipment or PPE at the start of the pandemic. This has endangered the safety of our health workers. The regional reserve is meant to solve this problem by maintaining a stockpile of essential PPE and other medical supplies ready to be distributed at a moment's notice. The third is the establishment of the ASEAN Center for Public Health Emergencies and Emerging Diseases. The center aims to serve as a regional hub for monitoring, preventing, and containing infectious disease and other serious public health threats. We want to stop emerging diseases in their tracks before they spread and cause substantial harm to the ASEAN population. We are now in the process of selecting a host country for the center. Other health and non-health initiatives are outlined in the ASEAN Comprehensive Recovery Framework and its implementation plan. The framework contains a five-fold strategy that will help countries exit from the COVID-19 crisis. These include enhancing health systems, strengthening human security, maximizing the potential of intra-ASEAN market and broader economic integration, accelerating inclusive digital transformation, and commitment to a sustainable and resilient future. It requires the collaboration of all pillars of ASEAN, the socio-cultural, economic, and political security to address the pandemic's multidimensional impact. ASEAN welcomes the development of safe and effective vaccines. It is a game changer that will speed up ASEAN's recovery. But as the World Health Organization pointed out, it is vaccination, not vaccines, that will end the pandemic. To secure vaccines, most ASEAN states joined the COVAX initiative of WHO, Gavi, the Vaccine Alliance, and the Coalition for Epidemic Preparedness Innovations, or CEPI. Under this initiative, participating ASEAN states have begun receiving COVAX-procured vaccine supplies. ASEAN states also ordered vaccines directly from vaccine producers. Vaccine rollout is now underway in all 10 ASEAN member states. Our COVID-19 experience shows that the ASEAN member states can work together and conceive solutions even in the direst and catastrophic circumstances. The ASEAN sociocultural community is committed to doing its part to ensure that the regional bloc comes out of the crisis stronger, closer, and more resilient.
Philippine-based companies are optimistic about their businesses next year as employers plan to expand the average salary budget by 5.6% by next year. The latest survey of global advisory, broking, and solutions company Willis Towers Watson said. Now, the projected salary increase in the country next year is higher than the forecast average increment in the Asia-Pacific at 5.3%. The estimated hike rate in the Philippines is higher than the rates of salary increase in Asia-Pacific economies such as Japan, 2.5%, Australia at 3.4%, Taiwan at 3.5%, Hong Kong at 3.6%, Singapore at 3.7%, South Korea at 4.1%, Thailand at 4.6%, and Malaysia at 5%. Companies in China are expected to further increase salaries to employees by 5.9%, Indonesia by 6.5%, Vietnam by 7.4%, and India by 8.8%. The company cited industries that reported the highest average salary budget increments, which include medical technology, business support services, including business process outsourcing and manufacturing.
In other news, the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation, or APEC, reinforces the importance of ethical business conduct for small businesses in the health sector by expanding implementation of ethics pacts as New Zealand launches a consensus framework to intensify ethical collaboration in its health system. In his opening remarks at the forum, the 2021 APEC Chair of Senior Officials, Vangelis Vitalis, highlighted the strong correlation between business ethics and productivity and how ethical businesses across the region can help drive business productivity by 3 to 6% per year. The New Zealand Consensus Framework was signed last year at the 2021 APEC Business Ethics for Small and Medium Enterprise Forum, according to a release issued by the APEC Small and Medium Enterprises Working Group and received here on Monday. The framework builds upon 9 similar agreements for ethical collaboration that bring together more than 300 health organizations representing thousands of companies and which affect hundreds of thousands of healthcare professionals as well as millions of patients. Consensus frameworks enable relevant stakeholders, including industries, healthcare professionals, patient groups, the governments, to work together by aligning shared principles.
Now, ASEAN hopes to raise awareness on and appreciation for the histories, cultures, arts, traditions, and values of the ASEAN region. 3 ASEAN member states actually account for the top 10 largest shares of creative goods exports from developing economies. Let's watch this video.
I will be back after this short break.
Sa weekdays prime ng Net25. Ang mga balitang pumapagaspas, ihahatid sa atin ni Emma Tiglao, Elis Saludar at Vic De Leon Lima. Sa mata ng Agila, tatalakayin mga pangunahing balita sa pagtutulungan ng Radyo Agila at Net25. Samahan si Weng de la Fuente sa Balitalakayan. At alamin ang mga balita saan mang panig ng mundo. Hatid sa atin ng Eagle News International. This is your Weekdays Prime. Handog sa inyo ng Net25.
Back to the news. Myanmar's junta chief Monday announced the release of more than 5,000 people jailed for protesting against a February 1 coup, days after a regional bloc delivered a major snub to the military regime. Take a look. There has been chaos in Myanmar since the coup, with more than 1,100 civilians killed in a bloody crackdown on dissent and more than 8,000 arrested, according to a local monitoring group. More than 7,300 are currently behind bars, that according to the Assistance Association for Political Prisoners, or AAPP. Junta head Menang Laing said a total of 5,636 prisoners will be freed to mark the Tanding Youth Festival later in October, without providing details on when they would be freed. The announcement comes on the heels of the Association of Southeast Asian Nations decision to exclude Menang Laing from an upcoming summit of the 10-country bloc over his administration's commitment to defusing the bloody crisis. Menang Laing gave no details on who would be included in the list, and prison authorities didn't respond to AFP request for comment. The Democratic Voice of Burma news website said 3 of its journalists, all held for around 6 months, had been freed. Myanmar authorities released more than 2,000 anti-coup protesters from prisons across the country back in June, including journalists critical of the military government. Those still in custody include the American journalist Danny Fenster, who has been held since being arrested on May 24.
In Vietnam, heavy rains submerged many parts of central provinces over the past days, and authorities warned of possible flooding and landslides. A combination of cold spell, tropical convergence, and windward terrain of Truong Son mountain range has resulted in torrential rains in central region since Saturday. Localities from Ha Tin to Tuan Tien Hu experienced rainfall of 300 to 700 millimeter, while localities from Da Nang to Binh Dinh and Co Tum recorded rainfall of 200 to 300 millimeter from 7 p.m. on October 15 to 1 p.m. on October 18, according to the National Center for Hydrometeorological Forecasting. National Center for Hydrometeorological Forecasting warned of flash flooding and landslides in localities from Ha Tin to Can Hua and Central Highlands as heavy rains would continue for the next 6 hours. At least 5 people have been reported missing since Saturday. In Quang Binh alone, more than 1,300 houses in Le Thuy, Quang Ninh districts and Ba Don town were submerged, and 2 residents were reported missing. At least 25 villagers in Minh Hoa, Quang Ninh, Le Thuy and Bo Trak districts have been isolated. Minister of Social Affairs Tri Risma Harini, or also known as Risma, on Monday emphasized the importance of anticipatory measures in mitigating disasters that can cause casualties. During her visit, she met quake victims at the Bangli General Hospital and in Trunian Village, Bangli District, as well as Ban Village in Karangasem District. She said she conversed with Trunian villagers about their request for both procurement for evacuations in case landslides happen again and destroy roads access and out of the village. She assured them that the ministry would help provide boats and tents at location chosen by village government. During her visit, Chris Maharini distributed assistance such as packages of food for children, blankets, mattresses, and foldable tents. 3 people were killed Saturday when earthquakes struck the Indonesian tourist island Bali, and the 4.8 magnitude quake struck at a relatively shallow depth of 10 kilometers or 6 miles northeast the town of Banjar Wanasari. Shallow quakes tend to do more damage than deep tremors. The tremor's epicenter was far from main tourist hub in Bali, which is slowly reopening to international visitors after a pandemic shutdown.
Now, aside from a clear view of the sunset, Filipinos now have another reason to flock to Manila Bay along the Rojas Boulevard shoreline. Take a look. The Dolomite Beach has reopened to the public after months of rigid quarantine protocols due to COVID-19 pandemic that limited people, especially children and the elderly, from going out. Now, on Monday morning, families and groups of friends were seen enjoying Manila's new attraction that welcomed the public on Saturday as Metro Manila was downgraded to Alert Level 3. Libraries, archives, museums, galleries, exhibits, parks, plazas, public gardens, and scenic viewpoints also reopened in Manila. Now, the Dolomite Beach allowed visitors at 5:30 a.m. Monday, 2.5 hours earlier than the 8 a.m. soft opening during the weekend.
Vietnam is looking to begin the 31st Southeast Asian or SEA Games by the middle of May next year. This was confirmed during the SEA Games Federation meeting on Monday. Philippine Olympic Committee President Bambol Tolentino proposed during the online meeting for the event to formally open by May 12. Originally scheduled from November 21 to December 2 this year, the SEA Games, still set to take place in Hanoi, was moved to May due to the coronavirus pandemic. Traditionally being done every odd-numbered year ever since its first staging in 1959, the 31st edition would mark the first time the event will happen in an even-numbered year. A total of 520 events from 40 sports will take place in Hanoi, with Philippine team participating in 39 of the sports. However, it is expected that the SEA Games will return to its usual every odd-numbered year schedule by the 32nd edition, with Cambodia finally getting the chance to host the biennial meeting. But the 2023 host is set to hold the SEA Games at an earlier date, which posed a problem during the Federation meeting since May 2022 start to the Vietnam Games has been set to.
And let's hope everything goes through. Thank you so much, Esther, for keeping me company today here on Asean in Focus, and for helping me out yesterday when my internet was down.
Always my pleasure, Alma. And that is the latest news in the Southeast Asian nations. Thank you for joining us today in ASEAN in Focus. I'm Esther Odanga from EBC Thailand Bureau, and we live in interesting times.
And we'll see you back here tomorrow, same time, same place. I'm Alma Angeles. We live in interesting times.
Dapat bang may agwat sa ating merong pagitan? Dapat bang may agwat na laging nakakain?
Hi, this is Chacha Cañete. Please catch me on Letters and Music this coming Saturday from 1 to 2 p.m. Only here on Net 25. See ya!
Na 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 na. Sana.
We know that this is a scary time for all of us.
The coronavirus is changing the world.
Changing our lives. So please, take care of yourself.
Keep your distance.
Wash your hands.
And if you can, stay at home.
We at DW
are here for you.
We are working tirelessly to keep you informed on all of our platforms.
We're all in this together.
And together,
we'll make it through.
Stay safe, everybody.
Stay safe.
Stay safe.
Stay safe.
Please, stay safe.
Ang susunod na programa